podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?
Greens sisters, but how was that for you? FPL returned with the usual array of emotions, the agony, the ecstasy, dreams realised and dreams deferred, drying up like a raisin in the sun, as American poet Langston Hughes once wrote. Speaking of pure poetry, I'm joined as always by Sam, who, as we'll find out, is a man who really enjoyed the opening weekend. How you doing, mate? Have you come down yet, or are you still loving it?
I mean, yeah, I'm still on cloud nine, honestly. It was completely ridiculous. What a weird weekend to experience. But Saturday was awful, which is so odd to say, which we'll come on to in a bit. Other than the fact I was at FPL Fest, which was, of course, fantastic. The actual matches on Saturday couldn't have gone any worse. So for everything else to go the way it did was quite bizarre. But yeah, what a weekend and what a return to FPL. I've seemed to remember why I enjoyed it so much all at once. And hopefully I haven't used up all my luck for the entire season in just one game week. But I'm sure most of you will agree that I probably have. Anyway, we are Who Got the Assist? A special welcome to all of our new listeners and viewers at the start of the season. Hopefully you enjoy it enough to stick around with us. On today's agenda, Game Week review, of course, we'll be talking through what we landed on, why we landed on it, and how we feel about how it all went. We'll talk through the new structure. Obviously, that's in place now. We'll be starting off with form versus fixtures, updated visuals this year, thanks to Tom. So good job on that. We'll be talking about some of the key men in vogue in terms of the transfer markets, good upcoming fixtures, and bits and bobs like that. And then new section, the Offramp, which will be focused mainly on the flip side of that, the selection of players being chucked out of our teams ahead of game week 2, and whether or not we think some of those picks being moved out are valid, especially so early on. Then we'll be moving on to the talking point this week, a bit of a time talking about what we learned and if, as many have said, we still know pretty much nothing at this point. And of course, we'll be talking about our teams as we move into game week 2. It is Tuesday, the 25th of August. There is some Carabao Cup going on in the background. And I believe tomorrow as well. We've got some Europe on Thursday as well. So at time of recording, the FPL Game Week 1 hasn't actually officially closed yet. They give it 24 hours after the final match has wrapped up to adjust bonus points and auto subs, things like that. But I'm sure it won't make much difference at this point. Anyway, shall we talk about Game Week 1, Tom?
Oh, it could be a short one. You never know. Hang on a minute. This is a ridiculously high score. Who did that? Blimey. Sorry, I just sound like I'm talking to my child. But I mean, Samuel Price, FPL expert, #1 content creator worldwide. You love to see it. Karma for obviously a massively tough year last year for those who weren't with us. Sam did have a bit of a struggle, but talk us through it. How did you do?
Well, yeah, I mean, for all the bad luck I got last year, I think I've made up for all of it in just one game week, which is concerning because I could use it running on a little bit longer than just game week 1. But yeah, I mean, how best do I summarize it other than I scored 93 points and I'm ranked 6K in the world after 1 week, which is, I genuinely don't remember ever having a game week where my game week rank was 6K ever. So to have that in game week 1 and be actually ranked 6K after the first game week is truly ridiculous. Friday night couldn't have gone better, really. My double up of Calafiori and White in the back was absolutely beautiful, both picking up assists, White with bonus points as well, and obviously kept the clean sheet. Solis also looked fantastic and was arguably unlucky to just come away with 6 points there. Then Saturday hit, and every single one of my players who blanked in my team all came from Saturday. Oh, no, that's a lie. One came from Sunday, but we'll come on to him in a minute. But from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players, I didn't pick up a single return on Saturday, including a captain blank from Bruno Fernandes. and 3 points on my bench boost at that point with 1 left to play. So I was feeling pretty glum about my prospects. I thought I'd wasted the bench boost, gone without Haaland, and it had all just blown up in my face immediately. Then Sunday comes around. I only had 2 players in the 2 p.m. kickoff from Brighton, not from Man City. De Kuiper went and scored 17 points on my bench, resurrected my bench boost. Verbruggen obviously held on to the clean sheet for 6. And then Szoboszlai and Isak combined for 10 points between them. One of them was going to take the penalty, but I had them both. So Szoboszlai picked up 8. Very happy with that. Then on went Monday, and Palmer and João Pedro picked up 24 points between them, combining for a goal and assist each. And Palmer looked like a man possessed. Like, absolutely ridiculous performance from him. And he was my differential alongside De Kuiper that soared me up to inside the top 10k after game week 1. So yeah, allow me a little bit of a gloat, I suppose, in game week 1, because it's all going to come crashing down when Haaland bags a hat-trick next week. But hey, what do we play FPL for if it's not for this feeling? So yeah, I'm absolutely chuffed.
I mean, let's give you your flowers. I mean, it was very ballsy, wasn't it? Because last Tuesday when we spoke before the deadline, the final preseason pod, you were umming and ahhing between Haaland and Haaland, and I think that, as I said to you, I'm not claiming any credit, of course, but as I said to you, like I felt like you had more conviction in your voice when it came to talking through the Haaland draft and the non-Haaland draft, sorry, and the kind of the benefits, the upside of going with it. And I'm very glad that you did do it, just because I felt like it was a big itch you needed to scratch. And I felt like if we'd have been sat here and you'd have got kind of 60, 70 points, which is what a lot of people sort of seem to net out at in the engaged community, that I think you feel like you'd missed an opportunity. And if it had gone badly, obviously that would have been a bit, but at least you'd have done it and you'd have kind of got that monkey off your back in some ways. So yeah, I'm very glad you did it. And yeah, I mean, you've been richly rewarded really for following those convictions. Like, you've always been quite a proponent of Palmer, for example. He's always been he's been a player that you've been extremely hot on, and you follow through with that. De Cooper was a player that, offline, we were chatting Thursday and Friday, you kind of kept thinking, I'm not too sure, but I think that there's definitely something there with De Cooper. Went with that, and you've been richly rewarded again. And as you said, it's resurrected your bench boost. I mean, that's just brilliant, really, how it's kind of all worked out. So yeah, it's the dream start, and I think that it's as you say, always worth asking for and receiving those flowers, because you due them for such a good week.
Oh, thank you, mate. It's difficult to even talk about it, honestly, because you just feel like embarrassed about how lucky some of the picks ended up being. But yeah, it's nice for it to all come in all at once. I did have a gut feeling on Palmer, so I'm glad I followed through. I very nearly switched him to like Semenyo, and then instead of De Kuiper, it would have been Williams. That was like the 50-50 I was on with like an hour before the deadline. And I'm glad I just basically went out for a walk and just said, no, Sam, you've been on this for over 24 hours. Don't do anything stupid now. Just go with it. So yeah, that was, I think, a difference of like 26 points between the two different combinations. So yeah, I mean, it will literally all come crashing down next week when Haaland bags a hat-trick. But for now, very happy. And it's given me a bit of like insurance, I guess, against that. Even if that does happen, it's likely not to be a car crash start, even if that were to happen next week. And we'll come on to it later, but I like the look of my team next week. So hopefully it can stand up again, even if Haaland does do something, but we'll see. It's early days.
Yeah, I've got to say that there's certainly, with when other people, not naming names, do well, it's kind of like whatever. But I think it's been really kind of genuinely lovely to see like the outpouring of goodwill towards you as well.
That's been lovely.
I think especially as a lot of people, especially listeners and viewers, who followed your travails, and I think that it just goes to show, doesn't it, that sometimes good things happen to good people.
By the way, thank you if you're one of those people. It does really genuinely make my day when I get those messages. So I try to respond, or at least like say something to everyone. But yeah, it really does mean a lot. It made my day. So thank you.
Lovely. Well,
On to you, mate.
from the sublime to the kind of modest success. So 68 for me, 16 for my bench boost, which is a massive success in my book. I know you kind of one of your players outscored all of that, but
It's still good though.
yeah, in perspective, I'm really, really happy with it. If I was offered, I think I said this last week, 10 points with no take backs on Friday night, I'd have snapped that person's hand off and taken it.
Definitely.
And the main headline, of course, was with Haaland blanking. I'm not sure I would be able to recreate the sound that came out of me when he missed that chance. O'Reilly set up. I tried, but it is what it is. We'll see how we go from here. And I remain happy in my decision as well to go with the Haaland draft. Yes, okay, the results aren't great, but well, they're okay. But yeah, it is what it is. Basically, the team remained the same. After the pod on Tuesday, except I had a crack at George Hemming's generational talent over Regan Slater and lost out 4 points in the process. Look, it's very easy for me to sit here and ruminate over things like, I'd be close to Sam if I had Gomez and De Kuyper, which I did in one draft. So I'd have scored 23 points in that one over 2, which is what I got from Ballard and Hemmings. But as I mentioned a few times last week, I purposely sort of set up my pre-season decision making to insulate against that a bit. Like, on Friday, I went out of my way to avoid any opinion at all, basically, and just stuck to the facts. Like, all the press conference stuff, I listened to that, but I just tried not to be sat there dabbling with my side. So in that way, I just didn't really have any regrets. I wasn't forlorn over not including X over Y. I think obviously the key difference for me was owning Haaland over you not having Haaland. Really, I think the fact that I included Ballard and Maguire, those two 5.0s, bewitched by the promise of a bullet header, and that not happening probably was the main letdown this week. But you know what? 68, kind of 500, 600k over rank. That's pretty good. I'm not at all disgusted with that. Highlights of the weekend for me actually were Dara O'Shea getting DEFCON. I kind of felt like he was likely to do that. O'Neill said afterwards that he was played kind of as a tool bloke to help with clearances from the aerial bombardment from Sutherland, and fair enough. And Aya as well, who got DEFCON with the very, very last kick of the game, pretty much, or the very last header of the game, effectively. I woke my baby up for cheering a flipping little half header. He didn't even head it very far. Like, it was just inside his box. Literally headed it probably about 4 or 5 yards. I was like, yes, that is a DEFCON, and I genuinely celebrated that. Stupid, these things, the things this stupid game does to you, isn't it? But yeah, I mean, I'm relatively happy with my team, and as I said on my blog, so I'm writing every Friday. I firmly believe my team can take on Narland teams. I think the Game Week 2 setup is pretty strong. I've got a decent bench boost off, and I'm just going to chill another week with a strong 11. We'll talk about that in a bit in terms of what we've learned and what we do going forward. But yeah, 68 for me. Obviously, quite a bit behind Sam, but I mean, to be honest, I'm just Sam's backing vocalist for this year. I'm convinced the guy is going to get, I think top 10k would be a disappointment. I think we're looking at kind of top 1k this year.
No pressure or anything. Jesus.
All those chickens are going to come home to roost. Is that right?
Well, I hope you're right, but no, I prefer us both to hit top 10Ks than me be soloing it all the way through. But look, you're off to a good start. I mean, I remember this time last year, we both took quite a while, I think, to get like solidly into the top 1 million, and that's happened for several seasons as well for a lot of very good managers. So you're ahead of the grain as far as I'm concerned, and you're well set up for next week as well, and for much longer than my team would be, and for a lot of Narland teams. So yeah, you're looking good. I think you're going to be standing in pretty good stead for weeks to come.
Let's see, shall we? Let's see. All right, and let's move on to form versus fixtures then. Do you feel like you've had your flowers?
Yeah, more than. Yeah, it's embarrassing.
Yeah, that's good. That's the kind of reaction I wanted. Right, so obviously form versus fixtures will evolve as we go through. If you're watching on YouTube, yes, we know the ridiculousness of having 1 week on here in terms of the data, in terms of the XGI, in terms of the points. Yeah, we know. But as we go through the season, it will get a lot more sensical. A bit of a mixture this week in terms of some short-term sort of high scorers attracting buyers in FPL, and also a fixtures pick. Because we're well aware, basically, that some may be chipped in game week 3, so they may want a 1 week punt, or maybe you're kind of wondering whether to keep this player because it also appears in the off ramp. But yeah, I think it's probably a cast of characters we're just going to have a look through and just talk about their longer term prospects, perhaps even beyond wildcard, and also a short term picks, and just generally debate them. I'm sure there'll be a few that we can kind of bring into discussion as well. But necessarily, I think because it's game week 1, our eyes are going to be drawn to those players who have done well in the first instance. And I think no more so than your man, M Sangare, or Mangare as I've termed him here. Apologies if those don't like that, but I don't care. Really good open performance. Kind of went from not very in DEFCON to smashing DEFCON in the space of about 20 minutes. Decent SGI, got an FPL assist plus a real assist. Looks like one of these players who, it's obviously 1 week, and the spectre of Tiani Reinders has been evoked several times when it comes to Mangare already. But Sam, the signs are looking quite good that he might be a player that when we do kind of come around to wildcard, me maybe a bit later than you, he's going to maybe be a bit of a stick on in our teams.
I think so. He looks early days like Elliot Anderson 2.0, for want of a better term, but he doesn't have the set pieces. That's the one thing that Elliot Anderson did have last season, but he does look just as good on DEFCON. And if he can just sort out the minutes, not get subbed early, then we've got a hell of a FPL asset on our hands at 5.5. I am incredibly interested in having him on a wild card, whether that be game week 3 or 5, whichever I end up doing. I think he's just going to be an absolute bargain for the quality of player. He also popped up in some relatively attacking areas, especially for that proper assist, not the FPL assist. Picked out a great ball as well on the cutback. So yeah, I'm thoroughly impressed with the quality of player. I think that bodes well for his minutes, and we know that he's a bit of a DEFCON beast as well. All signs point to him being a really good option at 5.5. I don't know whether I'd rip my team apart to get him immediately, because I think we will see maybe another early sub or something in the next few games whilst he beds in. But once he really gets up and running, I think 90-minute man, DEFCON, probably a bit of attacking threat. I wouldn't be expecting 2 assists a game or anything crazy like that. I don't think that's his job in the Brentford team, but he did pick up those advanced areas enough that I would see the odd assist, maybe the odd goal coming for him. So yeah, again, it's all baked into the price. 5.5 million. I think he's far better than the price suggests. So he'll be popular, very popular.
Yeah, and it's not just, I mean, it is a player that people wouldn't have heard of, but I mean, he was in the Ligue 1 team of the season, won the best African player in France last year. And it seems to be one of those players that Brentford again have stolen the march on basically everybody and picked up a bit of a gem, potentially. Do I see him as a Reinders? I don't know yet. It could be his hit. I mean, yeah, obviously there's a bit of fortune with getting the FPL assist as well. But you're right in terms of what I saw in terms of the movement. Him not exactly being a player that you'd cast as a number 6. It's a very much sort of an all action, all rounder sort of player, and that could be the sort of player that we really highlighted pre-season in those grids that we made, or the indexes. A player who has a bit of goal threat, a bit of kind of creativity, has the propensity to get DEFCONs. So all of these boxes are being ticked, and as you say, the only missing one really is the set pieces. But it might not matter. It depends very, very strongly. We'll talk about it in a little bit, but there are probably in terms of the week we've just seen, one of the smaller things that we might kind of pick up in terms of something being reaffirmed that we already knew. Prior familiarity, tactical familiarity, having that stability, having that sort of consistency of manager when it comes to a team like Brentford could stand that side in good stead. So we may see them having a very good season. And I think that Sangare is a kind of a great sort of addition to that team. And there is a bit of depth, of course, with talking to that minutes point. I mean, was it Yarmoliuk? Came off the bench, that there are these players who are ready to come on and ready to kind of play a role. But if he's performing like that, then I can't really see much kind of calls for him to be dropping out of the team. Maybe around sort of, Christmas time, his first season in the Premier League, maybe we might see a bit of that, a bit of rotation for him. But for the time being, no Euro. I think that's absolutely fine. So a player I'm very interested in as well at the price. When we get to wildcard, me looking at wildcard 6, maybe looking at 5.7, 5.8, that probably still going to be good value, isn't it? So,
Oh yeah,
yeah, no rush, but defo interested, as Odds just said in the chat, which sums it up perfectly.
it does. Yeah.
De Kuiper, a player who's looking, I think he's on the site, which is likely to rise tonight.
I think they both. I think Mangare might as well.
Okay,
I think those are the two that are like most likely tonight.
Okay, and so a player that you picked and I tipped as a player to watch for this year purely because that holy grail in the past of that opposition. Very, very interesting at 4.5. Obviously, we need to see what happens on Thursday. It's Chelsea up next, but then they run into a couple of fairly good games with Leeds at home and Coventry away. He was by far the best for XGI amongst kind of cheap defenders last year. Like, we're talking about a country mile here, and if he's filled in that position, obviously Villa were very obliging opponents, and who knows whether the upcoming team's going to do that. But I'm looking at free hit for Coventry away. If that was tomorrow, I don't see a world where he's not locked in as one of my defenders. I mean, at the moment, it's just so reactionary because this is game week 1, isn't it? But I mean, what a performance! Basically, I'm sure you massively enjoyed it.
Yeah, you could say I quite enjoyed that one. Absolutely unbelievable. I picked him very intentionally, knowing that he's likely not going to be an option for the entire season. I mean, it's not like this is a brand new player to the league or anything, right? Like, we know a bit about De Kuiper. He was there last season and he got minutes. It's just he's not traditionally known as an out-and-out left winger, and Brighton do have other frontline left wingers and wingers on both sides yet to come back in. So I think his time as a starting left winger is maybe slightly limited. How long that lasts, I don't know. But as long as he keeps playing like that, I think it's his spot to lose. Osman as well, who isn't a frontline left winger, but an up-and-coming talent for them, played well in the Conference League first playoff round. I would imagine he starts in the the second leg, not the replay, and then De Kuiper plays against Chelsea, because I don't see why you would take De Kuiper out of the Premier League lineup at this point, but just want to monitor because he played quite well in the Conference League. And then, of course, I know Minte's a little bit further out, obviously Mitoma as well, potentially. I would just maybe urge a little bit of caution. Like, it's not that I think he's going to continue to be this good forever. And I'm not trying to like hide him away and say it's my points, back off. But like, I would be a little bit worried about his longevity. Now, if he continues to play this well, absolutely fine. If we get to game week 4 and he's still a starter, I would not suggest even for a second not to pick him in a free hit team. But the minutes are going to be a problem later on. And even in this one, he got brought off slightly early as well. Now, obviously, that's because they were 4-0 up. So who cares? You don't need 90 minutes. But just want to maybe tread a little bit more carefully on. I wouldn't want to sell people the dream here, saying that this is just going to continuously happen all season. I would be a little bit fearful long term.
Yeah. I mean, to FPL Glasto said before, WGTA bingo variance. I mean, it was wild positive variance for you. But the possibility was always there. And you know what? Actually, him being, if he does start, him kind of being in line to be removed around the 60, 70th minute as defender, that's great. Yeah. So yeah, a lot not to dislike about him. That's a rubbish way of saying lots to love about NDC, as I'm going to call them from now on. And could be handy in terms of playing a role for us going forward. I mean, I know that kind of cheaper players, you favour them with FCON, etc., etc. I think you probably should. But if you've got a player who's playing so wildly out of position, has the underlying data from last year, and obviously has started off pretty well, then if that trend continues, it becomes sort of unignorable, despite the fact that they're less likely to be benefiting from DEFCON. Goals and assists still do provide those sort of boom and bust weeks, and as you've seen this week, getting a differential properly banging is rocket fuel to a rank. So he could be another one that could garner a lot of interest going forward, as could his teammate Hinshelwood, who obviously last year ended the season particularly strongly, which is why he got 6.0. And some idiots like me who are now completely wrong in the mud, washed, said that 6.0 was maybe a little bit high. But, 2 goals in 2 minutes for Hinchelwood. I think another one who could eventually draw a lot of interest. I'm not sure I'll be rushing to buy him this week, but a player who, when I think it's from game week 10 onwards, Brighton embark on a really good run where they don't play another top 6 team all the way up until kind of January, late January. They've got really good sort of November through Christmas, basically. And I think that he might be a player who you might kind of think, well, for the longer term, maybe he's worthy of a spot on my wild card. I'll certainly be considering it.
Yeah, I'll be considering it. I think the one thing I'm yet to be convinced on at the moment is the minutes, a bit like De Kuiper, except I think Hinchelwood will at least continue to start because he's good enough to. I would be a bit concerned that the 60-minute subs are going to be semi-regular, especially now that they've got Promise David as an option as a centre forward. Rutter might end up playing in that cam role from time to time. So just one to maybe keep a watching brief of that. Like, there's no need to rush him in ahead of Chelsea, I don't think, although they did look quite open on the counter. But I think you can probably wait and see what the minutes are like, whether or not he continues to play in that more advanced central midfield role. So far, I would imagine he does, but 10 game weeks is a long amount of time. If you're looking at him by that point, things might have changed. And I think there are other good options at 6 million and less, even his teammate Pascal Gross. I think he had a pretty good game for 5.5 million. If he gets 90 minutes, that could be an extra third of minutes on top of Hinchelwood, and 33% more minutes every week is going to add up to a pretty big FPL point scoring difference. Add to that, he should have had a penalty, and all of a sudden we might not be having this same conversation in the same way. So I think it's very exciting. We know that he had a great back end to last season, and the data was looking really good in that central attacking midfield role for Brighton. I just monitor the minutes for a little bit longer for me and just see how it all shakes out once they've got their full squad back, because I'm yet to be convinced that he's going to be a 90-minute man. And so far it was 60, but again, that's because they were 4-0 up, right? So maybe he would have played longer if they needed him to.
Yeah, you can probably tell we're giving short shrift to even mentioning the XGI data. I don't think it's even worth mentioning. But it was staggeringly high for both Brighton players. And I think that, Hinchwood's a really good example of promise for that price point. I think that we both said that, and I mentioned it in Tasman Theory as well, that sometimes these sorts of players end up surprising us in the midfield category. And who knows, it could be a breakout season for somebody like Hinchelwood. We simply don't know. I mean, props of people went there. I know that Ross Sepho Raptor went there.
He did, yeah.
Matt, Fernando's Maldonado went there. I mean, there are a few people dotted around who saw through the bluster and went for Hinchelwood. He might become the player, but as you say, I wonder whether the minutes is going to be something which people do look at and just bulk at paying 6 million for. And maybe that could be a secret weapon for people who do believe in him. We shall see. Cole Palmer, now unflagged. It was just cramp. One thing I did notice, Sam, sorry, it's a bit of a side point on Palmer, that in the past, when a player has become unflagged, haven't they become locked when it comes to price changes? Or didn't I'm sure that live FPL Ragaboli used to kind of deem them as locks, but it doesn't seem to be that way on the prices price changes on the official site. So I don't know whether they've changed something there. Bit of a nerdy point, but it's something that I thought I'd get your memories on, whether I remember that completely wrong.
Yeah, I remember something similar. I couldn't tell you the technicalities of what the ruling was, but I do remember a player that was effectively out for a while with an injury. So maybe it was because he was red flagged rather than like a minor knock. I don't know. But yeah, I did find that a little bit odd myself. Maybe they do have the power to like manually override if they've just made a bit of an error, because if they've cleared the flag within like a few hours of it being put on, then clearly they've just like misread the situation and they can assume that there was no injury in the first place. So maybe that's what happened. I don't know. But yeah, I rather enjoyed that performance on Monday. I'm not going to lie. I thought he was absolutely electric. One of the best single performances I've seen in quite a while, actually, I'd like to say.
Oh, yes, yes. I just think it's fundamentally good for the game if Palmer
Agreed.
does come through. I think that we saw last year, as I kept banging on about, the premiums fail to deliver. And I know Palmer's not a premium in the classic sense because of level pricing structure this year, but he is. He is at 9.5. But relatively, that is a premium in this year. And I think if alternatives are out there and banging, and if Bruno and Haaland do, they've got so much quality. You can never, well, probably not come to the conclusion that they're never going to score and do well again. Having alternatives also do well does provide alternative routes to take on the template if you are struggling, and kind of that's what's missing or has been missing, especially last season for a lot of people, that there was no way back. If you have to kind of be quite safe with the captaincy bits because the other alternatives weren't doing anything, and you were kind of trapped. And this sort of thing offers options, which is brilliant. And I think that that's kind of a really positive thing. Obviously, I'll keep monitoring him, and he may well end up. I'm sure he will end up on my game week 4 free hit, provided I do that, which I'm kind of 80% sure I will do. And then again, Chelsea, I think, go into a decent period after the international break. They've got, I think, Man City's the only game I'm really worried about for them is Man City and Arsenal. Arsenal in 3, so I won't own him for that. And then Man City, I think it's early December, but other than that, they've got a really good run of fixtures effectively, and I think they're going to do all right this year, especially with that front 3 firing. I mean, that was quite something. And João Pedro as well, by the way. Pretty close to a rise last time I checked.
Yeah, he's moving up fast. Unsurprisingly, I mean, he's just underpriced, isn't he, at 7.5?
Yeah.
I think he's like second, maybe third favorite for the Golden Boot this year, which I was a little bit shocked by. But the more I thought about it, the more I'm like, yeah, that actually does make sense. They've not got Europe. He's going to be playing as a centre forward behind Cole Palmer and Rodgers. Yeah, I can see it. I can see it happening that he scores 20 plus goals. I mean, yeah, that Chelsea front 3 looked electric. I think a little bit yet to be yet to be discovered as to whether or not they're going to be solid defensively. I did quite enjoy Lacroix's like booming headers out from all danger. I think after like 30 seconds, there was one which effectively set up Palmer to set up João Pedro. So we'll see how that shakes out. But yeah, they're going to be an exciting, quite fun team to watch this year, I feel. And that no Champions League thing is going to mean that rotation is going to be at a minimum. They probably want to thin out their squad a little bit because they've still got quite a lot of players hanging around that will be vying for minutes. But I think if they do manage to do that, they are going to be a serious force this year, especially if that front 3 can stay fit. And like I said, Cole Palmer gliding around the pitch, doing all sorts of tricks and flicks and skidding in and out of 4-5 Fulham players was something we haven't seen in over a year from him. So it was good to watch him feeling confident again. And I think it is, like you said, very good for the game if he can keep this confidence and keep this fitness, because it's going to give us all decisions to make. Because it's not going to be easy to have Haaland, Bruno and Palmer. So it's good news.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it feels like a long time ago when you had, Aguero, Salah, and then, you had Hazard there as well, who you could also captain. You also had like decent confidence in that player also doing well. Like, I feel like we've been so sort of conditioned to just accept that there's a Tumium and that's sort of it.
Yeah.
And I think it's gonna be so good to hopefully have that. It could be João Pedro, if those projections are true. But no, I really like that. Over Arsenal too, some players who caught the eye, obviously Coventry again, a very obliging, supine opponent. I just felt that Arteta absolutely outfoxed Lampard. I mean, I think I texted you, but it was incredible whenever we were in possession. You just saw Calafiori and White flooding the middle, and the overload in midfield that Coventry just could not handle it. It was, again, brilliant to see as an Arsenal fan. And Ødegaard at 6.5, I've included him here just because he did score the joint most points with Benny Blanco. Calafiori's the one who's actually getting the love. He's due a rise probably tomorrow. I mean, Odegaard 6.5, potentially one of those who people are kind of Solis obviously got all love pre-season, but a scuff finish and suddenly people think he's underpriced. I think there's something potentially in that. I think that it's still, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, remains a little bit kind of TBC when it comes to the Arsenal assets. That was a stroll in the park against Coventry. Yeah. Not sure that Villa, all due respect to villains, are going to present a massive obstacle on Monday night, but I think kind of from game week 3 onwards, it may start to be a bit more of a test of mettle for Arsenal. What do you think about that? It's certainly kind of one of those where I'm still sort of gathering information, and we'll talk about Ezri Konsa in a minute in the off-ramp as well, of course.
Yeah, what I gathered from Friday was it was just a professional job, very well handled. Look, Coventry, coming up to the Premier League for the first time in years and years and years, are going to try and put up a hell of a fight against Arsenal. The first 5 minutes or so, it did look quite promising for them. But Arsenal, just being the superior side, controlled the game, controlled the flow in midfield, like you said, by using those two fullbacks very smartly. And it's encouraging signs to see you being free flowing again. Odegaard like moving in and out of pockets. Solis, I thought, was very, very disciplined in his timing of runs. And when he drifted with intent. And it all looked very smart and very well thought out. So the signs are really positive. I'd love to get like really blown away by it all. But then I do remember it was against a promoted side. So maybe we just need to take stock of it and definitely notice these things happening. They're good signals, but I want to see it against maybe more, not competent, that's such a disrespectful thing to say, but like more experienced Premier League sides that we can maybe learn a few more lessons from. So if they did that against Aston Villa as well, and then also put up a pretty good showing against Chelsea, for instance, I think we'd be a lot more confident. Odegaard on the sheet, I thought he had a good game. I thought he kind of pulled the strings, and we've seen him do that prior to his injury setbacks over the last 2 seasons. And when he did, he's actually got really good rate of returns from both goals and assists, the 200-point haul, 180 in there as well. So we know he's got the capability of being worth far more than 6.5 million. I just don't know if the minutes are going to be there. It sounds so paranoid considering how good he is, but look at Arsenal's depth. Like, all it takes is Odegaard to have like the tiniest of little knocks, and they'll bring him off early, or they just won't risk him to start because they have had problems with him in the past. And he's so good that you don't want to risk anything, especially when you've got the likes of Eze who can easily slot in there. So I'm a little bit cautious, maybe a bit too paranoid about these things. And it might mean I miss the first few hauls that he gets if he continues to do this well. But I'd prefer to just know how Arsenal look against better opposition and whether Odegaard's minutes look secure enough for him specifically.
Nothing more to add. And finally, we do have a fixtures pick on here, who also appears in the off-ramp. I've put Bumo in just because of kind of the pre-season projections that United were going to blow away Hull and will blow away Ipswich as well. As a committed ABU, apologies to all United fans. I massively enjoyed the lunchtime game on Saturday. From a objective point of view, from a subjective point of view, obviously in FPL, coming away with 5 points from 3 players was not fantastic, but Bumo, in terms of the underlying data for one game, recorded quite a high total. So maybe it'll be him against Ipswich. I think that it's interesting really to just think about whether Ipswich are going to set up the 5 at the back again, 3 at the back again against United, seeing how Hull did that and performed very well. So maybe a watch out when it comes to Bruno as well, which we'll discuss, I'm sure, later on. But I mean, I don't know. It's early days really when it comes to the fixtures, which is why we've only got one kind of fixture-led player here. We don't really know who the whipping boys, quote unquote, are going to be quite yet. Teams to target are going to be at the moment. So he's kind of in there as sort of like a hangover from pre-season. I've still got enough faith that United at home at Old Trafford are going to win against a newly promoted team. The extent to which they're going to do it remains to be seen. I think they really need to score early. They probably need Sesko back fit. I mean, if Ipswich do set up with three at the back, having Cunha as the 9 just does not work against that sort of setup. They need somebody who is going to run on, try to exploit the space rather than kind of drop deep and try to get the ball. It just doesn't work if you've got three at the back, does it? Hopefully Bumo is going to come through because he was a player that I put a lot of stock in pre-season. It's a shame that, again, it's not kind of quite happened. I think he'll be around with me until I wildcard if I free hit and 4 to avoid the Manchester derby. One of those players that, we know what's in there. It just, for whatever reason, United doesn't seem to be coming out consistently as it did against Brentford, as it did when he was at Brentford.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's one game week and he got the chances. He should have scored. He absolutely should have buried one at least, and arguably one or two more as well. I'm really not all that concerned just yet. It is one game week's worth of data, and although he didn't actually put the points up, all the signs were there that he could and probably should have. So if you're judging him on his ability to miss chances, then by all means take him out. But no chance ahead of Ipswich at home. Look, obviously it could end up being that Ipswich and Hull are just better sides than Man United this year, but I think the odds are that that's probably not the case, and that Man United were a little bit unlucky not to finish their dinner on Saturday, and Hull did put up a really good fight at home. And I don't know whether Man United are going to be quite as poor as they were and make the same mistakes that they did against Hull when they go up against Ipswich at home at Old Trafford. I'm sure the crowd won't allow that. So I would still be pretty bullish on maintaining faith in Man United for at least one more week. These are the two fixtures we had them for. There's never such thing as a guarantee in FPL. So them blanking against Hull should not be the only condition that you measure them against. I think we need to give them a little bit longer. And Mbeumo's minutes right now look pretty good if Ahmad's out. So if anything, I'm a bit more bullish on him than I was, because I was a little bit cautious or dubious about the expected minutes in the first place. So now I think he probably gets 90 minutes on the right-hand side with Sesko up top. And I think that benefits him, if anything. So look, if he blanks against Ipswich, then the two best fixtures are out the way, and that may be a bit more of a cause for concern and good reason to maybe start looking at moving on Man United players. But half the reason we had them in the first place is yet to come. So let's enjoy that half a reason, and hopefully they balance things out in the second game.
Definitely. The only one I want to give a shout out to is our man from a couple of years ago, Johan Wisser, finally looking the real deal once more for Newcastle in that 10 role and then the 9 role once Asula came off. Like 6 million, obviously very, very promising. Newcastle do have a very nice run all the way into when they first faced Arsenal, which is kind of game week 10, game week 11, and he'd definitely be in consideration for me. I do think that Calvert-Lewin, we'll talk about him in the off-ramp in a second, probably does kind of, I'm not worried about that. And I think that he probably will retain sort of the position for me as that kind of cheapy striker. But it's a shout out for Wisser, really, just kind of showing perhaps in his performance why we loved him in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought it was a really good performance from him, and I would be very interested in picking him up on a wild card, for example, now that Newcastle's fixtures look pretty accommodating now Liverpool's out the way. So yeah, interesting one.
Right, let's move on to the off-ramp then. A new section looking at market forces like we used to with Nick, especially focusing on players being dumped to assess if they're being rightly sold or if people are being too rash. And also, as the season progresses, perhaps also highlight players who are in our team that maybe could have run out of steam, run out of road. Maybe it's the time to move them on to a different alternative. Obviously, it's game week 2. So our overriding advice probably is, unless your player is injured, don't move them on. Nonetheless, let's go through kind of a few players who are appearing in the Lemmings edition of the FPL transfer market as it comes to the start of the season. The first one is Esri Konsa, being sold by 135,000 so far. And
Apparently, they prefer it if you played for Villa, not Arsenal.
yeah. I mean, Pedro Porro is the most sold player for what it's worth, 261k. I can kind of see why people are sort of doing that, just because there's a lot more sort of there's probably a bit of interest in people who started the season with Porro, despite the fact that it was widely publicised he wouldn't be available for game week 1, and people looking at Calafiori doing points, who's got over 230,000, literally about the same number of transfers in. People are kind of going, well, I'm going to buy the Arsenal player who's done some points. Fine. Yeah, Konsa 156,000 sold. I mean, it feels like one hell of an opportunity on wildcard if he drops in price and looks like he's starting for Arsenal. As we said at the time, a bit of a game breaker potentially. I mean, I think all of these should be accompanied with the shrugging emoji a little bit from this point onwards. But this one, you can kind of see it, can't you? Although I'd imagine a lot of people who are selling Konsa are buying De Kuiper.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it, honestly. I if you've got Konza now, then I would take the win. Like, it might take a week or two for him to start games, but at 4.5, surely you can just bury him on your bench for a week or two rather than having to sell him. On the flip side, as someone looking at probably wildcarding fairly soon, please do sell him, because I'd love to buy him at 4.2, 4.3 million. That would be fantastic. He's not starting for Arsenal yet, but I don't think it's going to take too long, is it? Like, they bought him for a reason, surely. So by game week 3, 4, even if it's game week 5, I would happily hide a 4.5 million defender on my bench for 2 or 3 weeks if I knew that the payoff would then be that he then starts regularly for the best defense in the league by a mile at such a budget price. So yeah, I just don't sell him as far as I'm concerned, unless you are like immediately bench boosting this week and you need 15 players. That's the only way I would get on board with selling him.
Yeah, I think that's probably the only circumstance. I mean, look, there is a world where he either comes in for White on the right or comes in for Mascara in the middle, and it's not entirely clear kind of how he fits in. I mean, there could be there could be like kind of a, when a player signed for Pep, there was always a bit of a bedding in period, and it could be that kind of is the case. I think it kind of is one of those where I'm happy people are selling for similar reasons as you, that I'm probably wildcarding a bit later than you, and I'll have a bit more information by that point about how he's being used. But nonetheless, I think if you've started with him, you might as well just, as Sam says, just take a few kind of drops in price, whatever it's going to happen. If he starts playing for Arsenal again, you know what's going to happen. People are going to be flooding in to buying Konsa, so you're going to make that money back very quickly. Huge opportunity for wildcarders, and I'm sure that if you can spread some propaganda to get people to sell Konsa, please do. And the next 3 are accompanied by that shrug emoji. They are Bruno Fernandes being sold. Yeah, being sold an awful lot. Bumo as well being sold at a similar rate. Bruno Fernandes 140,000. It is 140,000. Yeah, I've had to check that twice. Have seen enough apparently. Bumo nearly 125,000 have seen enough. Dominic Calvert-Lewin nearly 100,000 have seen enough. Similar to Semenyo, nearly 100,000 people have seen enough. I mean, these are the sorts of transfers, without being disparaging, we see early doors all the time in FPL, and they are the sorts of things that more experienced and engaged managers do kind of cut out of their game a little bit. The player's blank once, I'm going to get rid of him. I mean, the sort of thing that you just don't see really very much. But one that I do kind of want to just meditate on a little bit is for inverts. Sam at 7.5 sells us racking up a little bit, 70k. I've sold him. For context, more people have sold the likes of Thiago, Shaw, Gabriel than him. But watching the game on Sunday, as much I love Flo. I'm going to just make that very clear. I love Flo. I started last season with him as well. I think that he's a really kind of incredible talent. But I just wonder whether he is going to really fit the Premier League. That he needs to either go down the Hazard route, bulk up massively, and be impossible to get off the ball. And he needs to kind of there's something about the tempo when it comes to him. It was noticeable when the ball kind of came towards him that it just kind of felt like the game kind of went down to 0.75 speed. Like it seems to take a tiny bit longer. You didn't really see it in the Bundesliga. Maybe that's kind of, people always used to say that Bundesliga to the Premier League was like a 1-to-1 or a near 1-to-1 in terms of the transition. I think people at the Transfer Flow tend to actually highlight that Ligue 1 is actually the most sort of similar to the Premier League in terms of the tempo and the physicality. And I don't know, it might be one of those things where it's just not the right fit for Flow. 7.5, am I saying sell at the moment? Probably not. I don't think there's anybody I'd be kind of saying, yeah, you might as well just admit you made a mistake and move it on. In the past, by the way, I have done that. So I started with Kai Havertz a few years ago when he was under Lampard at Chelsea, and Lampard just shot him on left wing, and he clearly didn't know what he was doing. Neither did Havertz. It's a Flow second season. I think that there is a great player in there. Whether Iriola can get out of it is probably going to be his biggest challenge at Liverpool. I do worry for Wirtz that it's just not going to kind of happen with the Liverpool career. Maybe similar to, I think I back his ads come through, but do I back Flow to do it? I've got less certainty, despite a lot of sort of love in the bank for the guy.
Yeah, I think it was a fairly worrying game week performance, or game week 1 performance. I think at times we saw a spark of brilliance last season. I think there's still signals there to indicate that he can make it in the Premier League, but I think some time will need to be taken to make sure that the system suits that style of play, and maybe a system that gives him a little bit more space to work within. At the moment, it does seem like he gets bullied off the ball a little bit, or he plays at the tempo he's allowed or being allowed to play at by the opponents, which again plays into what you were saying about the 0.75 thing. I think if the opponents are happy for him to take the ball, take a couple of touches and move it around side to side more often than not at the moment, then he will take that opportunity rather than trying to grab the game by the scruff of the neck and like make something happen. So I think maybe that's just as simple as Iriola having a bit of a word with him and saying, right, look, you gotta be a bit braver on the ball here. You got to take some risks. I think the most concerning part for me was him getting taken off so early when they're still chasing the game effectively. That for me was much more concerning than anything else we've said, because if you've got a player at this price only getting 2/3 of a game, that is a serious issue, especially when he doesn't have the set pieces. He doesn't have any penalty share. Like, he doesn't tick a lot of boxes when it comes to good FPL asset other than open play threat. And to even have that one ticked, he kind of needs not only his team to be firing around him, but also he needs to be on the pitch long enough to make it count. So the XGI per 90 might look half decent, but if it's not that he's getting 90 minutes, then it's kind of an irrelevant number for him. I probably wouldn't be selling him immediately, because it might just be Newcastle were running them ragged and they needed legs in midfield to handle it, and Wirtz just wasn't up to it for that match in particular. So it might be game week 2 comes around and he's able to stay on the pitch for much longer. I probably wouldn't be rushing him out this week, but I understand it much more than the 3 players above, Semenyo, Calvert-Lewin and Fernandes in this sheet, because the biggest concern for me is the minutes. And when you've got Szoboszlai in the same team at 0.5 million less, who plays the last 30 minutes in the position that Wirtz was meant to be playing, and he's got penalties, he just ticks so many more boxes than him. I can see why people would just make that move across immediately. Or to someone like Rodgers, who also, although he probably doesn't tick many more boxes than Wirtz in terms of the set pieces, pens, anything like that, I think his minutes are going to be better at the very least. And he looks much more comfortable in a Chelsea shirt than Liverpool and Wirtz do together at the moment. So I get it. but I'd probably, like the others, just wait a week or two just to see if they can get him ticking. Because I assume you weren't expecting him to just get a haul in game week 1 and then just for that to continue forever. Players can blank and players can have off games. And if this happened in game week 13, we probably wouldn't be so concerned. It'd be a blip potentially. So again, I'd probably be patient, but there is a little sort of red flag rising on him at the moment that you might be concerned about in a week or two's time.
Yeah, I mean, there's a good deal of sort of groundswell around Verts before game week 1, purely because of, you know, Herrera has come out and said words to the effect. I don't have the actual quote written down in front of me, but words to the effect that he's my number 10 for this year, which certainly kind of caused there to be a decent amount of interest in him. This also extends to other players who were game week 1 sort of darlings who have gone on to blank. So Enzo Lefebvre, Pascal Gross, both players. Pascal Gross blanking in a 4-0 win for his team. 8 possible returns on offer, 0 realised. Probably, you know, is a bit annoying, but these are all players that were very sort of high in the consideration set for a lot of people, and I think that kind of nicely leads us into the kind of the main talking point this week, which is about kind of knowing nothing. If you are on YouTube, apologies, trigger warning. Have tried to mesh a picture of the Premier League's photo onto Magritte's face. But you know nothing. FPL manager, have we learnt anything from game week 1? Look, I think that this is a really interesting topic that we kind of delve into every year. Some bits which are obviously meat and potatoes to engage managers, long-term WTA listeners and viewers, but it's always worth reiterating. We thought we knew lots in pre-season, right? I felt as though after the first round of fixtures, game week 1 seemed to, on a macro level, either reaffirm the stuff we already knew, Arsenal good, team stability and familiarity good, or underline the fact that the unpredictable stays unpredictable still. And that observation will chime with longer term listeners and viewers. And we tend to see as well on the other side of it that people, especially those who have been fed and regurgitated 24-hour football news churn, know they are. They're in your office, they're in your WhatsApp group, they may be your friends, and who feel like based on the opening weekend, they know who's won in FPL, who's lost in FPL, and who's a football and therefore FPL gem, and who is washed. That's always quite a fun kind of part of the game week 1 discussion around the office. The reality is that between game week 1 and game week 2, and apart from for Sam is going to get another 90 plus point haul and just be winning the whole thing. But the reality is, for most people, most kind of denizens, it normally does a total 180 in the next week. That's not to say that if a player looks like the bee's knees after 2 weeks, I won't be interested in buying this player. Being too cautious has definitely sort of cost me in the past. But making moves incredibly early in FPL, or thinking that, you know, game week 1 has kind of solidified kind of how the season's going to look, is probably folly. I mean, last year we saw that a lot of people did get a bit bearish about João Pedro, for example, after a bit of an anonymous performance the first game, and the punishment was insane, basically, for those who then went on and sold. I think with FPL, the key is to look at your team and try to think objectively. Like, if you think there's no obvious errors, there's no injuries, if you could send your team out again and think that, I was just trying to think in the headspace of a football manager save scummer, if you know what that is. You could simulate the next game week again and again, and most times you score enough to secure a green arrow. You should just chill the flip out and leave it be, honestly. I think that you've chosen your players for a reason. And I think that the fact is that there were some things that we already knew, and it's kind of reaffirmed, as I said, some things are just unpredictable, and we might find next week completely sort of is prey to bingo again variance. Yeah. What do you think we've learned, Sam?
100%. I think you summarized it really well. After 1 game week, we've got signals. But if you imagine any player from a scale of 0 to 10 out of 10, then you can almost like plot where you think, let's say Cole Palmer's going to be on that right now. Right now, he looks like a 9, maybe a 10, but the error bars are still really wide because it's one game week. We have such little confidence in the information that we've already got that, okay, maybe in 2-3 weeks time, he looks more like a 7, more like a 6-5, doesn't matter. But there are also players on the flip side of things like Haaland. Are we realistically saying because he blanked in game week 1, he's not capable of them being a 10 out of 10 pick later on in the season? Absolutely not. So apply that same sort of logic to some of the picks that are staring you in the face in game week 1 and being frustrating. Like Mbermo, we talked about. Bruno Fernandes, we talked about. There's probably Calvert-Lewin is probably another half decent one to talk about as well, where right now he looks like a 2 or a 3 out of 10, but the error bars are really wide. All it takes is a brace in game week 2. And we're all saying, well, I mean, thank God we started with him. He's off to a flyer, 2 goals in 2. He's already scored 15 points, 7.5 points a game. Fantastic. So it's one of those where you almost have to like relax a little bit into the fact that we still know so little after one game week, but do take stock of the signals, because those signals all add up to a pretty meaningful picture over time. But one game week isn't enough to paint the picture itself. You need to add them all together over quite a reasonably longer amount of time to make it make any sense whatsoever. So for now, collect the signals, but don't do anything rash based off of one game week, because we've got all the years of data from behind us as well that we can tell are also meaningful. Like, we know Haaland's a good pick. He's not going to keep blanking week on week on week, and nor is Calvert-Lewin, nor is etc. 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 So that's how I feel of it at the moment.
Yeah, I think that we know that if there's a really obvious move that needs to be made, a player who was fairly highly owned, or a player that's indeed in your team that clearly isn't going to cut the mustard, then fine. But there's a distinct absence of that this year. I think for game week 1, maybe if you just start with someone like Conser and you're an engaged manager and you were punting that for whatever reason you had the belief that he would kind of come straight into the team, fine. If you thought that Gyökeres, for example, was going to start the game, fine. I can see why you're moving that on. But I think fundamentally, it's one of those where you look at it and just go, nah. And one thing I think as well, which actually does sort of feed into this a little bit, is what we sort of spoke about last week in terms of, and I wrote about my blog as well, about this kind of small period of 1 to 5, and even more truncated for the Narland teams, is a little bit of a sprint. It's a little bit of like an FPL preseason almost, where we're not really in our sort of putative final forms when it comes to our teams at the moment. We've a lot of engaged managers. If you didn't set up to bench boost and you kind of just thought, right, I'm going to just play my chips when kind of my team needs it, fair enough. But I think a lot of the sentiment did kind of move towards building a team which was focused towards maximizing the first sort of 5-6 game weeks. And I think a big part of that actually was building a team which didn't need to make those transfers and didn't need to be jumping around an awful lot, using the free hit fairly early to kind of conserve those transfers, and then having them to go with to start stockpiling when you do build a team full of the Sangare types, and probably kind of looking at someone like Gabriel as like a long-term sort of pick, Raya and things like that in game week 6. I think that all of that needs to be sort of remembered. It's so hard to do an FPL given action bias, just because if you've not had the best start, maybe look at your team and think, I've got to do something to try to do this when everyone else is kind of a little bit ahead of me. There's also kind of stuff like Baden-Meinhof, which is cool to note, where if you see a new concept or notice a new thing, you can't help but see it everywhere, and that sort of helps feed bandwagons and herd mentality and stuff. But I think the Baden-Meinhof of this week really is just chill, and unless there's an obvious glaring mistake or more likely an injury, then stick with those players. really. And a couple of other things, Sam, just to kind of quickly cover off here. We all came into the season highlighting that context is key. Was, in your view, that post-World Cup lag visible? And there was goals for Saka, Rodgers, Odegaard, O'Reilly played, Rice played, etc. Was that overcooked, or was it something that you felt still kind of played a role just because a few of those players were substituted early?
Exactly. Yeah, I think that summarizes it perfectly. Like they're not incapable of doing well in limited minutes, but a lot of them were substituted early, and I think that's the main concern we had going into game week 1. Obviously, really good news that a lot of them did start, and some of them were clearly more ready than others, but we don't know which of those players it's going to be that were more ready than others. Like Haaland played 90 minutes in the end, but O'Reilly, who I would have actually probably guessed was more capable of playing the 90 minutes than Haaland would be, got brought off much earlier. Same goes for Elliot Anderson as well. So there's always that element of we don't really know, but what we do know is that World Cup playing players were more likely to be affected than those who weren't involved. So I think that context was key. And although it does mean that we miss out on some players that were capable of just hitting the ground running, there were a big batch of players that we were probably right not to take the risk of, and we just didn't know which were which at any given time.
Yeah. I mean, I think that bit perhaps was more of a little bit given a bit too much prominence, perhaps in the discourse. I think that kind of what was more noticeable were the likes of Villa and Spurs being bad, but surely that probably won't stick. The likes of Man United also being very bad, which was very funny. Will that stick? I just don't know. I feel like kind of trying to forecast based on 1 week is always kind of one of those that would never cut the mustard with me. And as I said earlier on, we might well see that the likes of Maguire, Bumo, Fernandez come away next week with huge numbers of points between them, and suddenly they look like incredible picks. One thing I found really interesting, actually, in terms of the underlying kind of transfer market stuff, is that it doesn't really affect the more sort of mainstream picks which are out there a lot of the time. Yes, as I mentioned earlier on, Bruno and Bumo are kind of quite high in the sales list, but they're not kind of being thrown out with kind of the same level of kind of gusto, not malo gusto, but gusto in terms of the word that we've seen in the past. So maybe there is kind of this sentiment towards just biding our time, and when it comes to looking at the transition between 1 and 2 this year, which is probably a good thing, because I think biding your time, especially in the context of a lot of us setting up for quite short term kind of run, is kind of almost definitely the best strategy.
Yeah, and I think generally speaking, FPL managers are more engaged and more well informed now. So the people are a bit more cautious these days. And on top of that as well, I think if Man United didn't have Ipswich next, and Chelsea, for instance, with Cole Palmer, had a nicer run of fixtures over the next couple, then maybe those transfers would be a bit more exaggerated. But for the time being, I just don't really see too many reasons to rush it. I think, like we said so many times on this pod, 1 game week is not season defining. 2 means slightly more, 3 more than that, and so on and so forth, until eventually we do get to paint a pretty big picture of what the season's shaping up to be. But right now, I mean, I wouldn't be overreacting just yet to a lot of these things. Villa, I will say that I'd be surprised if Villa turn it around instantly, considering the amount that they still probably need to do in the transfer market. That might take them a little while, but more on that in a moment when we come to our teams, I suppose.
Oh, well, our team was abysmal, wasn't it? I did. No, I completely agree. I think that if there is a player who looks like a runaway bandwagon in game week after game week 2, then I do start to get vaguely interested normally. But because, as I mentioned, that context of this year, when you're probably going to be, you're probably free hitting or wildcard in game week 3 anyway. But for everybody else looking to wildcard in 6, it's one of those where there's more leeway to kind of just give it a miss and kind of just stick to what you were planning to do. Yeah. I think that there's nothing that we've learned that we can kind of hang our hats on. I know we've said kind of loose opinions strongly held as part of kind of the unwritten rules pre-season, but after game week 1, the loose versus just I've just learned this, therefore it is true. I'm not going to be drawing any conclusions quite yet on anything that we've seen. So yeah, let's see, and let's move on to our teams for this week then to round off the pod. But as you can probably tell, we're probably going to be doing absolutely nothing. And as you've got quite a strong team, Sam, with Narland, it'll be interesting to see where you get to. So I've left you for last because I'm sure there'll be a lot more sort of questions regarding who's playing and who's not. For me, the team picks itself, honestly. Aya, who was always going to be first bench, has sat on first bench. Dara O'Shea, who I've got, I genuinely perhaps have got a few suspicions might do all right actually against United as second bench, and the team kind of as it is. My actual only question is whether I play Kinski or I play Verbruggen, which is why I hate having 2 rotating goalkeepers, but I'll probably give Kinski the nod this week. At the back, you've got those 2 5.0s. I'm hoping for a bullet header, lads. One of you, if you can show up, would be lovely. Maguire and Ballard, and then Ben White. I don't think the concert will play. Obviously, there's a bit of narrative there, but hopefully White continues in midfield. Bruno with the armband, Szoboszlai, and Solis up front. Haaland's got the vice at the moment. Joao Pedro and Calvert-Lewin. I'm going to go for the Bruno captain. Shockingly, I'm going to give you a second to get off the floor, Sam, after that revelation. But can I make a bold prediction? I think the Ipswich should get some against United, especially if Sesko isn't fit enough to start. As I said earlier on, I think Cunha, as we saw versus Hull, won't be very good against back 3. Bumo may be better, but you lose his ability outside. Like, they really need Sesko. And I think that Carrick, as I hinted earlier on, seems to really struggle against this kind of setup. Like, it's in danger of becoming a theme that its tactics don't suit playing against a back 5 or a team kind of asking United to break them down. Shades of Solskjaer. Who'd have known that having an interim manager who they make permanent could have caused an issue? And it wouldn't surprise me one bit if O'Neill outfoxes Carrick, honestly. But I'm not ballsy enough, I don't think, to not captain Bruno this week. I wish that Palace were worse versus Everton, but looking at the stats, and yes, it was one game, etc., they were very, very unlucky, I think, to lose by 2. I mean, big chance Mistetta probably should have scored at least once versus the Hilly Dick. So, yeah, I'm probably going to go with Bruno, of course. And yeah, I think that my team looks good this week, really. And what I really like about all of this, it suits my game style, as I said in my blog. I don't have any bench issues. I've got nothing to worry about. There's no headache whatsoever. So yeah, I think my team looks good. I think your team looks very good as well. The problem is that you could bench boost that, couldn't you?
Yeah, anyone got a chip spare? I'm really happy with the 11 I've got at the moment, but then I've got 2 benching headaches. One thing I am decided on is De Kuyper is not going near my starting 11 this week away at Chelsea. It's going to be end to end. I'm sure there's a chance he ends up with a haul, but I can't play him ahead of any of my starters or ahead of the other 2 on my bench either. So he's an easy bench. Right now, my starting lineup reads Kinski at home to Newcastle instead of Verbruggen away at Chelsea. Marginal, but I think Kinski's just ahead. Then I've currently got double Arsenal defence, White and Calafiori away at Villa, Maguire, and then 5-man midfield of Szoboszlai and Burmo, Fernandez cap, Palmer vice, Solis, and then up top, Isak and João Pedro. The two players that are currently on my bench, which could easily be in my starting lineup, are Calvert-Lewin and Ballard. Ballard would come in ahead of probably either Calafiori or White. I'm not benching Maguire at home to Ipswich. I don't care. It's not happening. And Calvert-Lewin would probably have to come in for Solis because there's no one else I can bring him in for. So it's basically going to be on instinct. And right now, my instinct is that I can't see Villa getting markedly better in the 1 week between Brighton and Arsenal. But then again, benching a penalty taker at home is probably never a wise idea, even if it is Calvert-Lewin. And Ballard's bullet header, DEFCON at home to Fulham, who did look a bit shaky at the back as well. Although not that bad going forward, it must be said. Maybe not that wise to bench him either. Right now, I'm playing the clean sheet odds because Arsenal have soared to the top of the clean sheet odds after the Villa performance at the weekend, up to 45% chance. It was previously 34% chance. So that has absolutely soared over the last few days. So it feels like an opportunity to have double Arsenal defense against them, especially two quite attacking Arsenal defenders. And Solis, I mean, the data will suggest, I mean, I'm sure I could go on to like models or whatever, and it will tell me Calvert-Lewin all day long. It'll probably tell me Ballard ahead of the Arsenal defenders, to be honest. But Solis, I know what I saw on Friday, and what I saw was an absolute world beater on that left-hand side. I thought he was phenomenal. And if Villa put out the same team again, I think he tears them to shreds. And I know he's not got penalties. I know he's not got set pieces. And that does just give me pause for thought. But I don't know. I mean, talking to the Arsenal fan, how do you feel about that? Like, am I just being completely thick by not starting Calvert-Lewin ahead of Solis or Ballard ahead of White or Calafiori? Because right now I'm looking at the team. If I forget who is on my bench, I love my starting 11. But then I look at my bench and I'm like, oh God, what am I doing? But I think I'd feel that way if I bench the Arsenal players instead.
So Ballard first. I think that playing Maguire over him makes sense. I think
Better clean sheet odds, just as much goal threat, same
Yeah.
DEFCON-ish. Like, yeah.
Yeah, well, DEFCON for Ballard is much better.
It's a bit better, but I don't know if
hit
I
rate-
wouldn't
hit
say
rate
it's
last
crazy better.
The
Like,
hit rate last year for Ballard was through the roof, wasn't it? It was like 60%.
yeah, but it's a 2-point difference even if he picks it up and
Yeah,
Maguire doesn't. So
that's the context you couch that in, isn't it? So I think that's probably okay. As you say, and this is why I didn't like this, because I don't like making these decisions, so I just choose to absolutely wuss out with them. I just can't see at the moment, apart from Solis or Szoboszlai, who again is another penalty taker, where I'd put Calvert-Lewin in your front seven.
yeah.
And it's kind of like the most reluctant of reluctant benches, because Calvert-Lewin is a player that if you, I'm sure, went on to anywhere, analytics wise, which I'm not using this year, as has been noted, I would look at it and be like, well, I would assume, that they would be like, well, obviously you play Calvert-Lewin as a pen taker over Solis.
Surely, yeah. 90 minutes as well. Solis maybe 75, 80. Yeah.
I commend you on kind of thinking kind of in terms of your own conviction that Solis is going to do a good job against who's left back for Villa at the moment. Is it Maatsen?
It'll be the right back that you're concerned about. Yeah.
Massey Cash. Oh, yeah.
I quite like that.
Yeah, I like that as well. Although the ex horrible Massey Cash challenge is fairly high. Look, I mean, I think that's a logical pick to have made. Brentford do look fairly settled when it comes to defensive area, and it wouldn't surprise me at all if we have another Leeds game. Leeds look very good, very solid. Brentford just scored 6, by the way, in the Carabao Cup, whatever that's worth. It wouldn't surprise me at all if that game becomes very similar to the Leeds Forest game, where both teams kind of cancel each other out. There's not a high number of big chances on offer. I think that Villa game for us has more potential for goals, which means that you look at wanting to get a bit of a share of that. And I think that makes complete sense to play Solis over Calvert-Lewin. So, yeah, a very reluctant bench. Don't look at your bench. Just I bench.
Yeah.
I've done
I
that.
don't normally mind bench points, to be honest. And like, look, this was part and parcel of the strategy. It was in the knowledge that this week would be tough. Originally, it was meant to be, I think, White and Solis on my bench instead of Calvert-Lewin and Ballard. But having seen Aston Villa's current starting 11 and how Arsenal played, I'm finding that difficult, basically. So yeah, that is what it is. There'll be points on my bench. It might come from De Kuiper again, but I'm happy enough with my starting lineup. There are the 50-50s that I will consider until the deadline. But right now, like if I rolled out this 11, I'd be pretty confident that it's an okay 11. Obviously, barring no Haaland or no Man City, that's the issue. But hopefully, I can cover it off with what is an absolute ton of home fixtures here, barring Arsenal away at Villa. Yeah, I think it's all right.
You're winning it, man. So what are you going to do in game week 3 then? Are you going to free hit wildcard? Is it kind of all based on vibes after this week just gone?
Yeah, undecided. I think I'm more likely to wildcard than free hit. But it's not impossible that I free hit and go through game week 4, maybe with a single transfer to buff up my defense a little bit in game week 4, and then wildcard in 5. I don't mind that. I think a lot of it probably depends on how bullish I am on Haaland after game week 2. If he just looks absolutely phenomenal, if he picks up another 0.8 plus XG against Palace, regardless of how many goals he scores, it's more the data that I'm looking at, whether he's getting the chances, then I'll be much more inclined to make sure that I get him immediately and permanently. Whereas if I feel like I can get through game week 4 without him, then I'll try my best to, because I'm already looking pretty well equipped for game week 4, specifically because I've got the double Chelsea in situ and double Liverpool as well. So yeah, I don't mind rolling it out through game week 4 and wildcarding 5, but I think I'm more likely to wildcard 3 as it currently stands.
Wow. Who are you and what have you done with Sam?
I'm going on vibes. What I will say though is, with a wild card, I mean, I know it seems very early, and even for me it feels really early, but I don't think many of the picks I'll be bringing in, even if I do wildcard in game week 3, are going to be massive risks. They're going to be players I know quite a lot about and have quite high confidence in. It's not going to be like any huge gambles that, like, who knows whether they'll pay off kind of thing. I think the main question on a wildcard in 3 will be, how much faith do you have that Konza eventually starts? And that's going to be maybe the small gamble. But I think even if I got to game week 5 and he wasn't starting by that point, I'd still be tempted to include him at that point. So I don't think it will make too much difference to how I'm structured. Yeah, we'll see. It's all really on how good Haaland and Man City look in game week 2. Because if I don't feel like I desperately need him by like permanently for game week 4, then maybe I can give myself an extra week's worth of information, or 2 weeks, I suppose.
Yeah, you go to 5, wouldn't you? I guess, and just kind of ride out.
I did look at game week 4 as a wildcard opportunity. It actually shapes up pretty nicely, but obviously that's burning 2 chips back to back, and it does take away some of the appeal of a free hit in game week 3. So
it's the Arsenal game, isn't it? Which is quite tricky. And then you're kind of looking at, I think you're looking at kind of, is it free hit 9? It's like the next juncture to potentially do a free hit because of the team construction that you may put together in 3 or 6 or 4 or 5. That was it. That was the next one. All right. Well, good content for next week, I suppose. Let's see what you do.
Well, I'll definitely be on a chip, one way or another. So tune in to find out which one I fancied using. Maybe it's triple captain. No, it won't be triple captain. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
Hopefully, I'm not ranked 1 million. That's the main thing. If I'm back down to 1 million after next week,
there's no way. I just can't. I just don't
it
know.
can happen. It
I
can
just don't
happen.
know. I think that the beauty of what you've done in Game Week 1 is that I just can't see that. There's no way you can get. I think the biggest hit you'll possibly take is probably down to kind of 100 to 200k. I mean, that's like
I'd still be very happy with that, honestly. Yeah.
That's if stuff really, really flipping goes wrong. And we'll talk next week about triple captain in free, because I think that if you are on a Haaland draft, there may be a strategic advantage to playing it in free. But we'll come back to that next week. Potentially,
yeah, absolutely. And that will be my disadvantage. But anyway, I think we are reaching the end of today's show. So thank you all for tuning in, watching and listening. And thanks again, especially if you're new around here as well and watching for the first time. We hope you're enjoying it enough that you'll stick with us for the remainder of the season, especially when it all goes wrong for me, inevitably. But we have been Who Got the Assist. You can find us on Blue Sky at Who Got the Assist, all written out, one word. FPL Pricey for me on there. On X, again, I'm just FPL Pricey, or it's WGTA_FPL. And on YouTube, it's Who Got the Assist, all written out, one word, or FPL Pricey for me. Or if you fancy checking out my second channel, it's Pricey Talks Football. If you did enjoy the pods, please do one or all of the following, including following us on those social channels, giving the pod a 5-star rating wherever you're listening. And of course, if you're watching along on YouTube, hit like, hit subscribe as well. We would be forever grateful.
Lovely. Thanks for me too. I've been Tom, the backing vocalist to the next FPL winner in Sam, FPL Pricey. Just to mention as well that I'm trying to do more writing this year, something I've always enjoyed but lack time to do. Be aiming to publish a weekly blog around deadline day. Do check out on Medium when I post it on socials. When we do stuff probably in the international breaks, I'll kind of write something that's slightly more chunky. I think you can subscribe to me on there too, so do that. But anyway, back after Game Week 2. Hope we assist you pick through the bones of the open weekend, and we'll see you all next Tuesday.
Oh, it's a goal. Who got the assist? Who got the assist?